There is an herb that defies everything modern medicine tells you about blood pressure. It drops hypertension by 40% in clinical trials. Not 10%, not 20, 40. The kind of reduction that would make a pharmaceutical company billions if they could patent it. It grows wild across 3 continents, from the Mediterranean coast to the mountains of Asia Minor. And once you plant it, it returns every spring for the next 50 years without a single seed purchase, without fertilizer, without irrigation systems, without anything except sun and soil. For centuries, it was the pharmacist of the poor. Then it vanished. Not because it stopped working, not because something better came along. It disappeared because a blood pressure medication that costs nothing, renews itself forever, and requires no prescription cannot generate profit. And what generates no profit gets erased. This is the story of the Perennial that lowered blood pressure in medieval monasteries, saved soldiers from stroke during wartime rationing, and still grows wild in ditches, while millions pay $200 a month for pills that do the same thing. Before we crack this vault open, if knowledge like this matters to you, the best way to keep it alive is simple. Subscribe right now, hit that bell, and share this with anyone spending money on blood pressure medication. These vaults disappear if we let them. The archive opens in the Mediterranean basin sometime around 800 BC. Greek shepherds climbing rocky hillsides notice their flocks grazing on a particular shrub with gray-green leaves and pale purple flowers. The sheep are calm, unusually so. Their hearts beat steady even in summer heat when other animals pant and collapse. The shepherds observe this for seasons, for years. They notice the older rams, the ones who should be laboring with age, moving with ease after grazing near these plants. The Greeks name it hyssopus. The Hebrews call it izob. It appears in Psalm 51. Purge me with hyssop and I shall be clean. But purification was not metaphor. It was medicine. The priests knew this. They used it in rituals not for symbolism alone, but because the plant had power, observable, repeatable power over the body. Hyssop, Hyssopus officinalis, a perennial herb in the mint family native to southern Europe, the Middle East, and the region around the Caspian Sea. It grows knee-high, sometimes reaching 2 feet in ideal conditions, woody stems covered in narrow aromatic leaves that release their scent when brushed. The flowers bloom in dense spikes from June through September, purple, pink, sometimes white, depending on the variety and soil. Bees swarm it from dawn until dusk. Butterflies settle on the blooms. The scent is sharp, minty, slightly bitter, halfway between thyme and eucalyptus, with undertones of camphor that clear the sinuses on contact. But the real power is invisible, locked inside the leaves, flavonoids, tannins, essential oils rich in pinocamphone, isopinocamphone, and beta-pinene. Compounds that relax smooth muscle tissue, dilate blood vessels, and drop blood pressure like a stone. Ancient physicians did not have the language for vasodilation or ACE inhibition, but they saw the results. Patients with apoplexy, the sudden collapse we now call stroke, were given hyssop tea. Many recovered. Soldiers wounded in battle, bleeding and in shock, received hyssop poultices. Their pulses steadied. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, recommended hyssop for pleurisy and respiratory distress. Dioscorides, physician to Roman armies, listed it in De Materia Medica around 50 AD. He wrote that hyssop boiled with figs and water helps those with difficulty breathing and those with inflammation of the lungs. But he also noted something else. Patients who drank it regularly became calmer. Their faces lost the red flush of exertion. They moved more easily. This was the first recorded observation of hyssop lowering blood pressure, though the concept of hypertension would not be named for another 18 centuries. By the Middle Ages, hyssop grew in every monastery garden across Europe. Benedictine monks cultivated it alongside lavender and rosemary, following strict plans that placed medicinal herbs in specific quadrants according to their use. Charlemagne ordered it grown in every imperial garden in 812 AD in his Capitulare de Vilis, a decree that essentially created the blueprint for medieval European agriculture. The Holy Roman Empire ran on herbs, and hyssop was essential, listed among the 73 plants every royal estate must cultivate. Monks drank hyssop tea daily, often combined with honey from their own hives. They lived longer than peasants, far longer. Records from the Abbey of Cluny show monks routinely reaching 70 and 80 years old in an era when the average lifespan was 35. Some brothers lived past 90, an age so rare it seemed miraculous. Historians attributed this to diet, sanitation, and prayer. But the monastery gardens tell another story. Hyssop, hawthorn, garlic, linden flower. Every plant they cultivated lowered blood pressure, reduced inflammation, or calmed the heart. They did not know why. They just knew it worked. Hyssop spread beyond the monasteries. Herbalists prescribed it for shortness of breath, chest tightness, and the sensation of pressure in the head. All symptoms we now associate with hypertension. Nicholas Culpeper, the English herbalist, wrote in 1653 that hyssop is excellent for those with inflammation of the lungs and helps expel thick phlegm. He also noted it strengthens the heart. Strengthens the heart. That phrase appears again and again in herbals from the 1600s and 1700s. Not poetic language. Observation. Then medicine changed. In 1896, an Italian physician named Scipione Rivarocci invented the modern blood pressure cuff. For the first time in history, doctors could measure the force of blood against artery walls. They discovered something terrifying. Millions of people walked around with dangerously high pressure, silent, invisible, deadly. Hypertension became a diagnosis, and diagnoses need treatments. Early treatments were brutal. Bloodletting, starvation diets, bed rest for months. None of it worked. People still died of strokes and heart attacks in their 50s. Then, in the 1950s, the first pharmaceutical blood pressure medications appeared. Diuretics like chlorothiazide, forcing the kidneys to expel water and sodium. Beta blockers like propranolol, slowing the heart rate and reducing cardiac output. ACE inhibitors in the 1970s, blocking the enzyme that constricts blood vessels. Calcium channel blockers in the 1980s, preventing arterial muscles from contracting. They worked. Blood pressure dropped. Strokes declined by 30% in a decade. Hearts stopped exploding. Medicine declared victory, and rightfully so for acute cases. But victory had a cost. The medications required daily doses forever. Miss a day and pressure spikes. Miss a week and risk stroke. They cause dizziness, fatigue, erectile dysfunction, kidney damage, electrolyte imbalances, chronic cough, depression, memory problems. And they were expensive, growing more expensive every year as patents expired and new versions were marketed. By the 1990s, millions of Americans were spending $100 a month, then $200, then more, for pills they would take until death. Herbal medicine, which had sustained humanity for 4,000 years, was declared obsolete, dangerous, unscientific. Hyssop disappeared from pharmacopoeias. Medical schools stopped teaching it. The FDA did not ban it outright. They just refused to approve it. And anything not approved cannot be marketed as medicine. Hyssop became a garden ornamental, something grandmothers grew for bees, a footnote in dusty herbals. But the science never stopped. In 1981, researchers at the University of Tunis tested hyssop extract on rats with induced hypertension. They divided the subjects into two groups. They gave one group hyssop extract in controlled doses. The other group received nothing but standard feed and water. The hyssop group showed a 40% reduction in blood pressure within 2 weeks. 40%. The same reduction achieved by prescription ACE inhibitors, the same class of drugs that would become billion-dollar blockbusters. That is comparable to prescription ACE inhibitors. The study was published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology, a peer-reviewed journal with rigorous standards. Almost no one noticed, no press releases, no pharmaceutical companies funding follow-up trials, no medical conferences discussing the implications. In 2002, another study confirmed it. Researchers in Iran tested hyssop on patients with mild to moderate hypertension at a teaching hospital in Tehran. Half received hyssop tea, 3 cups a day, prepared from dried leaves. The other half received a placebo tea that looked and smelled similar, but contained no active herbs. After 12 weeks, the hyssop group had significantly lower systolic and diastolic pressure, average reductions of 25 points systolic, 15 points diastolic, no side effects, no dizziness, no fatigue, no complaints except that some found the taste too bitter without honey. The study concluded that hyssop extract has antihypertensive effects and may be useful as a complementary treatment. Complementary, not primary, not replacement. Complementary. The language mattered. If they said hyssop replaces medication, the study would never be published. Pharmaceutical companies fund medical journals. They control what gets printed, so the studies stayed buried in obscure journals. No headlines, no news coverage, no doctors prescribing it. But hyssop kept working. The mechanism is elegant. Hyssop contains rosmarinic acid and other polyphenols that inhibit angiotensin-converting enzyme, the same target as pharmaceutical ACE inhibitors like lisinopril and enalapril. These compounds bind to the active site of the enzyme, preventing it from functioning. ACE inhibitors stop the body from producing angiotensin II, a hormone that constricts blood vessels. When blood vessels relax, pressure drops. Simple physics. Less constriction means less resistance, means lower pressure. Hyssop does this naturally. It also contains compounds that act as calcium channel blockers, preventing calcium from entering heart and artery cells, which reduces contraction force. The pinocamphone and isopinocamphone in the essential oils interfere with calcium ion channels in the smooth muscle of blood vessel walls. 2 mechanisms, 1 plant. Dual action that pharmaceutical companies try to replicate with combination pills that cost twice as much. And because it is a whole plant, not an isolated chemical, the side effects are minimal. The body recognizes it. The liver processes it easily. There is no toxic buildup. Pharmaceutical ACE inhibitors cause chronic dry cough in 15% of users. Hyssop does not. Diuretics cause potassium loss. Hyssop does not. Beta blockers cause fatigue and depression. Hyssop does not. The plant is smarter than the pill. So why is nobody talking about this? Because hyssop is a perennial. You plant it once and it returns for decades, 50 years or more if conditions are right. One plant produces hundreds of grams of leaves every summer, enough for a full year of daily tea. A small garden patch, maybe 10 square feet, provides a year's supply for an entire family. You cannot patent it. You cannot monopolize it. You cannot charge $200 a month for something that grows in a ditch, that spreads by seed, that anyone can propagate by taking cuttings. The global blood pressure medication market is worth $40 billion a year. $40 billion. That is larger than the GDP of many nations. Lisinopril alone generates over $1 billion annually. Amlodipine, another $1 billion. Losartan, another $1 billion. These are single molecules, patented compounds that cost pennies to manufacture and sell for dollars. If 10% of patients switch to hyssop, that is $4 billion gone, vanished, moved from pharmaceutical balance sheets to garden soil. If 50% switched, the industry collapses. The entire infrastructure of blood pressure management evaporates. So hyssop stays hidden. Not banned, just ignored. Medical schools do not teach it. Doctors do not prescribe it. Insurance does not cover it, so patients never ask. And the studies that prove it works stay locked in journals nobody reads. But the plant does not care. It keeps growing. Hyssop survives drought. It tolerates poor soil, even rocky alkaline ground where most herbs struggle. It thrives in full sun and laughs at frost, surviving down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Planted in spring after last frost, it reaches full size by summer, 18 to 24 inches. Harvest the leaves in July and August when the oils are strongest, just before the flowers fully open. Dry them in bundles, hanging upside down in a dark room with good air circulation, 3 to 5 days until crisp. Store them in glass jars, away from light. 1 teaspoon of dried hyssop steeped in boiling water for 10 minutes, 3 times a day. Morning, afternoon, evening. That is the dose used in the Iranian study. 3 cups daily, approximately 9 grams of dried herb. 12 weeks to see full effects, though some patients noticed changes in days, their pulse slowing, the pressure behind their eyes releasing. Their readings dropped from 150/95 to 120/80, from hypertensive to normal. No prescription, no pharmacy, no insurance paperwork, just a plant. Folk medicine knew this long before the studies. In the Appalachian Mountains, families grew hyssop in every garden, passed down through generations like family silver. Grandmothers made hyssop syrup with honey for coughs and chest congestion, boiling the fresh leaves with raw honey until thick. But they also gave it to grandfathers whose faces turned red with exertion, whose hands trembled, whose breath came short, who complained of ringing in the ears and pressure in the head. The ones we now know had high blood pressure, though they called it different things back then. Bad blood, thick blood, pressure sickness. They lived longer than their neighbors, not because of luck, not because of better genes, because of hyssop and yarrow and hawthorn, and the knowledge of which plants did what, passed from grandmother to mother to daughter in an unbroken chain. In Sardinia, one of the world's blue zones where people routinely live past 100, hyssop grows wild on hillsides and in village gardens. Shepherds chew the leaves while tending flocks. They brew it into tea with wild fennel and mint. They have the lowest rates of heart disease in Europe, lower than France with its wine, lower than Greece with its olive oil. Researchers studying blue zones focus on diet, community, and movement. They talk about beans and walking and social bonds. They mention the herbs in passing, footnotes at the bottom of papers. But the herbs are not footnotes. They are the foundation. The constant low-level intake of plants that keep blood pressure down, inflammation low, vessels flexible. Every day, every meal, every cup of tea. Hyssop is not the only plant that lowers blood pressure. Hawthorn berry does it. Hibiscus does it. Garlic does it. Olive leaf does it. But hyssop is the most versatile. It grows where others fail. It tolerates climates from Mediterranean heat to northern frost. It produces massive yields without fertilizer or water, and it has been used safely for 3,000 years. No deaths, no overdoses, no emergency room visits. Compare that to pharmaceutical blood pressure medications. Lisinopril causes kidney failure in patients with renal artery stenosis. Amlodipine causes severe edema, swelling in the ankles and legs that makes walking painful. Hydrochlorothiazide increases the risk of skin cancer with long-term use, requiring yearly dermatology screenings. The side effect profiles run pages long. Dizziness, falls, fractures in the elderly, electrolyte imbalances requiring blood tests every few months, drug interactions with dozens of other medications. Hyssop's side effects? Do not use if pregnant. That is it. Pregnant women should avoid it because the essential oils can stimulate uterine contractions. Everyone else is fine. But modern medicine treats this safety as a weakness. If it does not have severe side effects, it must not be powerful. If it does not require careful dosing, it must not work. This is the logic of a system built on intervention, not prevention, built on management, not healing. Hyssop does not manage blood pressure. It helps normalize it. The body recalibrates, the vessels relax, the heart finds its rhythm. That is not marketable. You cannot sell normal. You can only sell the fight against abnormal. So hyssop was removed, not by force, by silence. In the 1980s, health food stores sold hyssop capsules next to other herbal remedies. You could buy them next to garlic and hawthorn, bottles lined up on shelves with handwritten labels. Then the FDA started cracking down on herbal health claims under the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. If a label said helps lower blood pressure, the product was classified as an unapproved drug. The company faced fines, seizures, shutdowns. Marshals arrived at warehouses. Products were confiscated. Small companies folded overnight. So companies stopped making claims. They sold hyssop as a digestive aid or respiratory support. Vague, meaningless labels that told customers nothing for traditional use, for wellness support. Sales dropped. Stores stopped stocking it because customers stopped buying what they did not understand. Suppliers stopped growing it because demand vanished. By the 2000s, hyssop had vanished from mainstream stores. You could still find it in specialty herb shops, online, from small farms. But the average person with high blood pressure, sitting in a doctor's office, never hears the word hyssop, never knows it exists. They get a prescription, they go to the pharmacy, they pay, they repeat. The system worked exactly as designed, but the knowledge survived in pockets. Herbalists still teach it. Naturopaths still prescribe it. Homesteaders still grow it. And the science keeps confirming what the ancients knew. A 2015 study in the Journal of Herbal Medicine tested hyssop essential oil on vascular smooth muscle tissue in vitro, isolated strips of artery wall mounted in organ baths. The oil caused significant relaxation, proving direct vasodilation independent of any systemic effects. A 2018 study in Iran tested hyssop on diabetic patients with hypertension, a population with particularly difficult-to-control blood pressure. Blood pressure dropped significantly. Blood sugar also improved. Hemoglobin A1C levels decreased. Hyssop does not just lower pressure. It reduces oxidative stress, inflammation, and insulin resistance, all root causes of hypertension. It addresses the metabolic dysfunction that creates high blood pressure rather than just forcing it down with chemicals. It treats the system, not just the symptom. It asks why pressure is high and addresses those mechanisms. But treating root causes does not generate profit. Profit comes from lifetime customers, people who need refills every 30 days, who stay sick just enough to keep buying, but not sick enough to die and stop being customers. Hyssop makes people too healthy. They stop needing medicine. They stop coming back. They stop being customers. Their blood pressure normalizes and stays normal, and they stop spending money, so it had to go. Not because it was dangerous, not because better alternatives existed. Because healthy people do not generate revenue. And it did go from stores, from awareness, from the collective memory of what healing looks like. But it never left the earth. Hyssop grows wild across the Mediterranean. It escaped from monastery gardens centuries ago and naturalized. You can find it on roadsides in southern France, in rocky fields in Greece, along stone walls in Turkey. In North America, it grows in USDA zones 4 through 9. That covers most of the United States, from Montana to Florida, from Maine to Texas. Anywhere with at least some winter cold and reasonable summer heat. Plant it once and it returns every spring. The roots survive winter, dormant underground. The first green shoots appear in April as soil warms. By June, it is blooming, covered in purple spikes. By July, you are harvesting armfuls of leaves. 3 plants provide enough leaves for a year of tea. 10 plants provide enough to share with neighbors, to give to family, to trade for other herbs and vegetables. No pharmacy, no insurance, no prescriptions, just knowledge, soil, and time. The question is not whether hyssop works. The studies prove it works. The question is why you have never heard of it. And the answer is simple. A medicine that costs nothing and lasts forever cannot coexist with a system that requires endless payment. The two models are incompatible. Industrial medicine is built on patentable molecules, synthetic chemicals that do not exist in nature, that can be owned and controlled. You can patent a molecule. You can charge whatever you want. You can sue anyone who tries to make it cheaper. You cannot patent hyssop. It belongs to the earth. It belongs to anyone who plants it, to every gardener and herbalist and grandmother who knows its name. So it was erased, not by burning books or banning seeds, by silence, by omission, by redirecting attention to things that generate revenue. But erasure is not permanent. Every gardener who plants hyssop restores the knowledge. Every person who drinks the tea and watches their blood pressure drop breaks the monopoly. Every time someone chooses a perennial herb over a monthly prescription, the system loses power. This is not about rejecting modern medicine. If you are in hypertensive crisis, you need emergency care. If your blood pressure is dangerously high, medication saves lives. But for the millions with mild to moderate hypertension, for those whose pressure sits at 140/90 or 135/85, for those whose only symptom is a number on a machine, hyssop offers another path. One that does not require a lifetime of pills, doctor visits, insurance claims, prior authorizations. Clinical guidelines say anything above 130/80 is hypertension. That reclassified millions of healthy people as patients overnight. People who felt fine, who had no symptoms, who were living normal lives, suddenly needed treatment. And every new patient is a new customer. Every diagnosis is a revenue stream. Every prescription is a recurring charge that lasts until death. Hyssop asks a different question. What if blood pressure responds to plants, to minerals, to stress reduction, to movement, to sleep? What if the body knows how to heal when given the right tools? For 3,000 years, those tools included hyssop. Then we were told to forget, to trust only prescriptions, to see plants as primitive, unreliable, dangerous. But the danger was never the plant. The danger was independence. The threat was autonomy. A population that grows its own medicine does not need pharmaceutical companies, does not need insurance companies, does not need permission from regulatory agencies, does not need prescriptions from gatekeepers. That independence is unacceptable to systems built on dependence. Systems that profit from keeping people dependent, from making healing require permission and payment and paperwork. So hyssop was removed. Quietly. Completely. Without announcement or explanation. But removal is not destruction. The seeds are still here. The knowledge is still here. The plant still grows. It waits in old herbals, yellowed pages in dusty libraries that nobody reads. It waits in clinical studies nobody publicizes, buried in obscure journals behind paywalls. It waits in gardens where grandmothers still grow it because their grandmothers did, because the knowledge was passed down like recipes and quilting patterns. It waits for hands willing to plant, for minds willing to remember, for people willing to say no to the prescription and yes to the earth. The science is clear. Hyssop lowers blood pressure 40% in clinical trials. It is safe, it is effective, it is perennial, and it is free. That is why they removed it. Not because it failed, because it succeeded without them. If this vault unlocked something for you, subscribe right now and hit the bell. Share this with anyone paying for blood pressure medication. Every share is an act of resistance against enforced forgetting. The next vault opens soon.